And we're live!
Hello! La, la, la. Hello, all. Welcome. It is Wednesday. Yes, it is. It's Wednesday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter. Hopefully that connection corrects itself. I guess it's not used to seeing us on a Wednesday night.
It's not used to us being here on a Wednesday night.
Definitely
we'll see what happens. It's always
Definitely
shifty.
Definitely not. Where do we begin before our wonderful guest Pascal Robert comes on? Well, I think Jen doesn't generally like to talk about Jimmy Boy.
No, I don't.
We'll talk about him for a minute because he did have on Dr. Cornel West this evening for an interview. Haven't watched all of it, but I did see a very important clip, which the discussion was about class versus race. And so from Jimmy's perspective, he really is of this notion that you have to just not talk about race or any social issues whatsoever. Everything must be devoted to class. Now, on the one hand, I do agree that the class war is the lead. It is without question the lead. But what Dr. Cornel West said very eloquently is this is where we have a fundamental disagreement because I believe that class and race are very much intersected. And so while this conversation is happening, you could just see the rolling of the eyes, if you will, from Jimmy, basically acting like this is incorrect. I know better than you.
That's just some over woke stuff, right?
Yes, very much so. And
yeah,
it to me, I am.
It all matters. But see, this is what's so. Why does everything have to be like an either or a hierarchy? Like it doesn't make sense to me. It all matters, and they are interconnected. And maybe like at one point in the beginning of, I don't even know which century, where class was the issue and race wasn't the issue, that might have been the case. And then now race is an issue. It was made an issue to participate in the Capitol and the class war and all of that, but now it's an issue.
Not only that,
it's an issue.
But the race issue is interlocked with the class issue because they use race as a means to distract you from the class issue.
Yeah.
There's this great meme of Rupert Murdoch sitting at a table with an urban black man and a rural white man. And he's basically sitting on a pile of cookies. The black man doesn't have a cookie, and the white man doesn't have a cookie. So what Rupert says to the white rural guy is, be careful, that black guy's going to take your cookie. Right. It's like, that's the distraction. And that's how the race war is effectively intersected and connected to the class war.
You don't like my music, says, I wouldn't expect or to like Dr. West. Well, what's interesting is that he was all about him when he was running with the People's Party in the very beginning.
Very much.
So I'm actually, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't watch that show, but, I'm at least glad to see that he was able to step out of ego for a few minutes and host Dr. West on his show, even though I'm sure there was a little bit of like a, tinge of annoyance about the whole People's Party thing. But, maybe he's developed a little, or maybe it was just for clicks. Who the hell knows?
The problem, of course, is that there's a big ego drive that comes in. Jimmy has good ideas, but a lot of people have good ideas. And the problem, of course, with having a very large platform is that you're also faced with this situation that the bigger a platform gets for somebody, even if they know the score, they know what's going on, they'll have a propensity to say, well, since I know the score and I know what's going on, my opinion matters more than other people's. And that's where it drifts into this area of, I know better than you, Dr. West. I understand you've been an intellectual thought leader for the past 50 years, something in that range.
I mean, yeah.
But I know more than you. That's how Jimmy comes on. And that's the problem. Jimmy is not about making friends and influencing people. Jimmy's about Jimmy. And that works for a lot of people because there are a lot of topics that Jimmy talks about where he's correct. But you know what? It's also very polarizing because he's not willing to see it from Dr. West's perspective. And then it seeps into that unfortunate circumstance of an older white man who can't see it from the perspective of an older black man.
I wonder if this would be his perspective if Cornel West was still running with the People's Party.
I would agree with that 100%. And I do think that there is a
Jimmy's
tinge
perspective would be different.
Oh, I do think there's absolutely a tinge of resentment. There's no question that exists there.
Yeah. And you know what? Whatever. I mean, I really am not that interested.
What I'm interested in is Dr. West formulating some type of a
ground game,
anything that is going to force the hand of the Democratic Party establishment.
I've reached out to help. Nobody responds.
I'm also curious to see if actual pressure can work, because you're going to have to find the details on it and see just how true it is. Because remember, you can't read the highlights. The highlights will say one thing and then something else is happening behind the scenes. But evidently the pressure, supposedly, that was put on by Elise Joshi and people who are affiliated with Gen Z for Change, the Sunrise Movement, have put out headline insinuating that the Biden administration has 86 about 8 drilling projects in the Alaskan wildlife refuge. If that is true, that's good. But is that just 8 drilling permits of 150?
Right. If it's in proportionate to other things, like how he does everything else, it's just, it's not enough.
Like, that's what we need to know. It's great that they're 86ing 8 drilling projects. Do you know how many drilling projects are going on in any
right, or there are like 1,000?
That's the problem.
Right. We don't know.
Either are just 86ing the I'm forgetting the name of it right now, the one that's in Alaska.
The Willow?
The Willow Project. If you're not 86ing the Willow Project, then I don't want to know that you're 86ing 8 drilling permits.
It could be 8 defunct permits. Like, the way that's written, they will pull facts that are facts and just take them out of context, or take them so it's just not relative to anything else. So it seems really good. What I know about this administration is, for every little bit of praise that some sort of sycophant gives them, it's sort of in response to something where they fell woefully short and did like the bare minimum, if anything. And so it's just sell that somewhere else. Sell it somewhere else.
Yeah. And this also gets back to the whole issue that we are seeing right now when it comes to any type of solidarity, unification on the left, or even just populism in general. We get so caught up in this silly minutia about, well, this person said this or that person said that, and well, how come you're not listening to me? And then it becomes, well, if you don't listen to me, then I'm done with you. I don't want to help you. If Jimmy cared about the movement the way that people who wish that they had that type of a platform cared and would make that impact if they could.
Oh, I wish I had that platform.
Jimmy could do wonders for Dr. West if he really wanted to. But in his mind, it's do it my way or you don't get any help.
He's more about people kissing the ring. He really is. He likes people to kiss the ring.
And that's where a lot of people should be looking at Jimmy and saying, dude, you're wrong. This isn't the answer. Even if you're not getting everything you want with Dr. West, he's still running outside of the two-party system.
Like, nothing is good enough for them. Nothing is ever good. It just, this is why I really don't want to talk about him. I didn't even know we were talking about that.
Well, kudos to Dr. West for going on the show at the very least. Well, because at least his message gets out there to that audience over the course of 45 minutes or whatever it was. But
I just don't care about the show.
There's a reason why we don't talk about him, because he's not what you say very often is on the mission.
No, he's not on. He doesn't share my mission.
Well, does our guest for the evening share your mission?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely for sure.
Before we bring in our esteemed guest, fellow Floridian, suffering fellow Floridian as well.
Well, that's the thing. There's, there's not a lot of like left, content creators in Florida.
Yeah, we're kind of on an island.
Well, and down
a peninsula.
Here, there's not many. I mean, that I know of.
But for those of you who do like our channel and obviously would care to support our efforts, please go to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a supporter of our small but mighty channel, as we say. And since we are demonetized right now for reasons that still have not been clarified, and of course we all know that really just has to do with making, maneuvering amongst the.
I know why it happened.
Jen has a theory.
I have a
and we'll
theory.
just stick to that.
Okay.
So any help will obviously be provided. $10 a month will get you the last matching parliamentarian bumper sticker.
Please.
And of course,
I'm
for
gonna have
those
to
that
get.
are
I hate that
feeling
sticker
extra
now.
generous, you get yourself the Jen Change jersey for $25 contribution. Now, of course, if you don't want to put your credit card on the grid and you would be so kind as to make a contribution, all you have to do is go over to Cash App.
Exactly,
Dollar
Travers.
sign Jen Change. That contribution goes directly to the show. So, of course, that
It's all helpful.
yes.
It helps.
And
us.
since you couldn't even give us a super chat if you wanted to, now you don't have to worry about any contribution to the show. That
Yeah,
you're getting
we're
siphoned off.
sad,
in the
demonetized
wrong
for another
direction.
couple of months.
Yes. Well, less than 2 months.
I'm
we
being
hope.
punished.
Well, maybe you get punished again. The next thing you know, they'll find something else once November comes
But-
around. Like, and now you're suspended again.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of how it is. But when you speak truth to power, that's what happens. And speaking of speaking truth to power,
Yeah.
our guest this evening is somebody who really does that and then some. And this revolution and then some is what we're hoping is what we're working on here.
This is revolution.
Yeah. In
That's
some way, shape, or
the-
form.
That's the show. This is Revolution. And Pascal and Jason Miles are, both on that show and both great. And it's just been, Jason's in a whole other time zone. It's a whole Baja.
Then you'll just have to accept having
No, but
Pascal Robert on the show.
that's why I don't reach out as much, because it's just like he's all the way over in Baja, Mexico, sitting on the beach.
Well, the fact that Pascal made the
Drinking
exception tonight to
margaritas.
help make this happen, since our schedules do not cross all the time, we have made the exception. We are very pleased to welcome back to Generational Change Pascal Robert. How are you, sir?
Hey, good evening, guys. Thank you for having me on. Man, listen, I know we've been struggling with scheduling for about 2-3 months now, and
It's hard.
I just want to say, I hope you guys don't think that I've been giving you the cold shoulder. It's just that
Not at all.
it's tough to make the schedule, between our show, because we do 3 nights a week, and Jason has content, and I got to try to pick up my writing schedule as well. So, but
no, I don't think that at all.
I'm really glad that you guys invited me on, and I was able to lock up with fellow Florida left content creators. It's interesting. I don't really frame us in that way because it's too painful to think about. But it's actually, it's somewhat cool that some of us are out here, trying to make the revolution happen, so that when the fash comes down, maybe we can all huddle together and find somewhere to go in Florida or something. Who knows?
Yeah, and we are definitely seeing we're seeing fascism at all these levels that are going on, and not just in Florida. I mean, we're going to talk about the case in Atlanta with the arrested protesters and activists that are being charged under the RICO statute, which is off the wall, off the wall. But there's so many crazy, just right-wing authoritarian stuff happening all over the place. And then there's all these
bipartisanly.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, I'm not talking I'm talking outside of partisan politics. I'm talking the actual right-wing authoritarianism is happening. It's in both parties. That's neither here nor there. And then what's so frustrating is then there's the left. And again, not partisan left, just people that are that are so splintered because of partisan crap. So it's really the partisan stuff is, I think, what's getting in the way of actual leftists sort of doing anything, whether it's the party, no party represents us, whether it's that, or, just there's so many problems, but the left is hard to sort of coalesce.
What's interesting? Can I comment on that briefly, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I don't know how old you guys are, but if you're similar to my age, I was in high school in the 80s and in law school in the 90s, and I remember. So we're kind of in our we're 50-ish, if you will.
I'm 50-ish. That's a really good phrase. Yes.
Okay, so we're contemporaries in age.
Yes.
You and I are old enough to remember where there was no such thing as a left in America after the 60s.
Yeah.
All right. We have a theme on This Is Revolution podcast we call the 50-plus year counter-revolution. The theme of it is that basically after the new left of the 60s, everything that came after that has been a counter-revolution politically and socially against the New Deal civil rights coalition that came about in the 60s. A lot of people don't know that the 60s was not only about civil rights. You had civil rights, you had feminism, and labor was a large part of the civil rights movement as well. So what happens is that the reactionary right, starting with Nixon winning the 68 election, realized that they had to neutralize the unity of the New Deal Civil Rights Coalition. And Nixon probably was one of the most effective presidents at doing that. Certain things he did is that, for example, he appealed to working class whites' fear of the newly, quote unquote, economically empowered black majority by using tactics like, they don't respect the good old American ways, particularly with the rise of the hippies. So you had the hard hat rebellions in the early 70s. Also, to neutralize the kind of radical politics in the black community, he instituted something called black capitalism, which is a policy that continues to this day that was used to inspire particularly middle class and upper class blacks to invest heavily in capitalism, and it was used as a tool to neutralize radical politics. So and then he came, of course, with mass incarceration, COINTELPRO, and all that stuff. But what is interesting is that the tactics that start with Nixon continue bipartisanly. We have the rise of the Trilateral Commission with Carter, continue bipartisan. Then we have the DLC with Clinton in '88 that makes the Democrats even worse than the Republicans. So the bipartisan counter-revolution against the 60s spans both the majority of our lifetimes. Okay?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There were no one was talking about Marxism, socialism, Leninism. No one was talking about challenging. You couldn't hear about challenging the Zionist state. No one was talking like that. Right? You had 3 channels on TV. If you got lucky in the 80s, you might get cable news. And pretty much we were limited in our perspectives. What happens with the rise of Sanders, Occupy Wall Street, is that we have a new generation of millennials and Generation Z who are introduced to the old left thinking, socialism, Marxism. And what happens is that because they have no experience in actually organizing movements, and most of them are just downwardly mobile college kids who can't find work, they foist themselves into the intellectual intricacies of leftism. I'm a democratic socialist. I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I'm an anarchist. I'm a Trotskyist. All of this crap that doesn't mean a damn thing in contemporary politics becomes the fetish obsession of thousands of kids who are now new to leftism. And I will be honest with you, some of them become even arrogant in their adopting this and believe that they know it all. So what happens is that they wear their left identity like a t-shirt, like a frat t-shirt, and it's like a club. It's like a club thing. I'm an ML. I'm a trot. I'm a dem sock, and and you find people writing books. So we have too many Marxist Leninists in the left. Really, the left in America is literally 5 people talking to each other in a football stadium of 50,000 people, and they're all arguing.
That's the problem.
Yeah. And
it's very frustrating.
It's profoundly frustrating.
And when push comes to shove, you really get to see how this is a class war. And obviously there is the elements of race that are obviously thrown into it as well. And we saw that. And if we want to go into, Bill Maher right now, we're talking
Also,
about,
disclaimer, people, another person I don't really care to talk about, but somehow seems
neither do
relevant.
I, but I do think that Bill Maher is relevant in this context. Bill Maher swims in the elite waters. He's run a show for multiple decades. He gets the biggest names in Hollywood and politics on his show. And when he's making the type of commentary that he's making here, I think, my opinion, and I think it's reflective of where people in his circles are feeling about what's going on with the writer's strike and the SAG-AFTRA strike.
I saw that video. I think I know what you're going to talk about.
We talk a lot about labor here because, and you mentioned that earlier as well. That's like this part of the equation that often gets left out when we're talking about like race and class. And
right.
it's like those three things really kind of need to all be addressed. They're like sort of three legs of the same table. Like it needs to work.
We're going to play a 2-minute clip now so that people get an idea of what class war really looks like when somebody like Bill Maher, who it seems that a number of people on the left or even in the middle and so on have a favorable opinion when he makes certain takes. But when it gets down to the nitty gritty, he is a classist of the highest order, and he loves.
Oh, he's even worse than that. He is an actual pit bull of democratic centrism.
Ooh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When he started saying that Bernie and Hillary were basically the same person,
like,
okay, well that's a giveaway. So here we go, Bill Maher with Jim Gaffigan sharing his thoughts on exactly how terrible this writer's strike is becoming and how inconvenient.
The strike is a perfect example. Those guys would never go back. This strike could go on till the 24th century. They would stay out. I feel for my writers. I love my writers. I'm one of my writers. Yeah. But there's a big other side to it, and a lot of people are being hurt besides them. A lot of people who don't make as much money as them in this bipartisan world we have, where you're just in one camp or the other. There's no in between. You're either for the strike, like they're fucking Che Guevara out there. Like this is Cesar Chavez lettuce picking strike, or you're with Trump. Like there's no different. There's only two camps, and it's much more complicated than that.
It is, but I do feel like there is a lot of the points, a lot of the grievances I kind of agree with.
I do understand that they're getting screwed a bit by the streamers, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a change, and you either, it's like anything that is, I believe in free market, but I also believe in trust and then verify, right?
What does that mean?
Meaning, you don't trust, like the reason, I mean, Zaslav made $400 million, and I think they're looking for 80 million for, it's like they're gonna, you leave a kid in front of a bowl of marshmallows, they're gonna eat the marshmallows. It's not like some grand thing.
Well, I don't know. What you're saying, they're only asking for $80 million?
Well, I'm saying
they're asking for a lot of things.
They're asking for a lot of things.
Like kooky. Like what I find objectionable about the philosophy of the strike, it seems to be they have really morphed a long way from 2007 strike, where they kind of believe that you're owed a living as a writer, and you're not. This is show business. This is a make or miss league, and not everybody.
You don't think that that streamers should reveal numbers so that they can?
Maybe
things?
Sure.
Okay, so they're not deserving of a living wage
or health care.
Well, but just that he said that, it's so insulting.
But it's revealing. It's very revealing.
He's like, I love my writers. They're not entitled to a living wage, but I love them.
Well, you know what's interesting? I mean, obviously, Bill Maher is, a boomer. He's Ivy League educated. He went to Cornell. He's from New Jersey. You from New Jersey also?
Oh yes,
he is.
Okay, so you're familiar with the, contrary to the notion that New York and New Jersey is some kind of liberal bastion. That's not the kind of Democrats that you have in New York and New Jersey at all, by any stretch of the imagination. So his worldview is very much shaped by his background, and also he's old enough to remember watching the politics of the 60s. And he strikes me as one of those who was pretty much scared and didn't like it very much, the way the country was changing in a lot of ways, and tend to kind of side with authority. But the thing is, though, to be fair, when he started in television, he was much more left than he is now. Like something happened. He evolved. So maybe there's something that explains this as to why he evolved into being such a centrist. Because I remember when he had the other show, as a matter of fact, didn't he lose a TV show? Because he said something about how the United States kind of deserved 9/11 because of our foreign policy or something like that.
He made some sort of comment in that regard. Politically Incorrect?
Yeah, I watched Politically Incorrect, and I remember the show. And what happened was that it was shortly after 9/11, and he basically said, there's a lot of things you could say about the terrorists. One thing you can't say is that they're cowards. They were willing to die for their cause.
Right.
And for some reason, that was considered, oh my God, how could you say such a thing? Well, he's not wrong. And that's what you fire him for? Yeah. And then the next thing you know.
So this is a possible theory. Maybe the sting of getting burned from Politically Incorrect made him realize, I got to play ball with the establishment, and I'm going to play ball as much as possible. So that possibly could be why he really shifted to being, into. I mean, he wouldn't be the first. I'm not saying he was ever a leftist, but he wouldn't be the first person whose circumstances, whether being getting fired or otherwise, helped them play ball with, management or the bosses or the elites to keep their pockets greased, if you will. So that might explain it. But regardless of how he got here, he's got horrendous classist politics. He's clearly a class enemy. He is used to shore up the worst of democratic centrism. And frankly, I wish that people on the left would call him out more for the class enemy that he is. Part of the problem we have is that too many people believe regular Democrats are leftists. They are not.
Right. Right. And I would say, especially in the case of Bill Maher, and looking back, and I have watched him forever, and I will always give him Religulous, shout out, that was a great film. And his stance on some of his routines and stuff where he would call out certain religious stuff was great to me as an atheist, and I always appreciated him for that. But looking back, he was never a leftist. He was always a libertarian. And his attitude was always, I can do whatever I want to do, and consenting adults can do whatever they want to do. And that is one of the reasons I actually do like him, in that a lot of those in certain regards, but he was never left. No. But now he's become extremely elitist.
I think that there's a couple of ways to look at it. Number one, I can still remember when Bernie really picked up momentum in the summer of 2015. He was a guest around the same time that Ann Coulter went on the show, and everyone lost their ish, if you will, and were hysterically laughing at this notion that Donald Trump was going to be the next president. And she even said, well, if you nominate Bernie Sanders, that's going to be your best shot at stopping Trump. And even Barr was like, ooh, interesting. And so when he had Bernie come on, he made it very clear that I want to support your campaign. I want to see you get the nomination. I'd like to see you be the next president. I'm thinking, this is the Bill Maher that I always believed he was. And then shortly thereafter, ever so slightly, and then eventually very overtly, he basically came to the conclusion of, no, Hillary and Bernie are the same, so it really doesn't matter who. I do think that
maybe somebody got him in line.
Well, I think that's definitely part of it, especially when you consider who owns HBO, Time Warner. And then at the same time, you also have to factor in what I believe is Trump derangement syndrome. I do believe that Trump broke Bill Maher's brain in a lot of ways.
Oh, no. I'm going to be very honest with you. I think Bernie Sanders suffers from Trump derangement syndrome. And I'll tell you why.
He's towing the party line on that one, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the fear of Trump is what stopped Bernie from going after Hillary after Trump won, or going after the Democrats. I think the fear of Trump is what stopped. Listen, Bernie Sanders in 2020, after the Democrats manipulated the primary to have Jim Clyburn fix it so that Bernie was knocked out and basically put the nomination in Biden's hands, Bernie Sanders had 35% of the Democratic Party in his hands that he could have turned into a movement to literally push the left so hard against both Biden and Trump and really done what was needed. And I'll be very honest, a lot of people won't like me hearing this. I actually blame the failures of Bernie Sanders as to why the left is so weak right now, because he did not pick up the mantle to push a movement as he said he would to challenge the duopoly and their duopoly-based capitalist politics. And instead, out of fear of Trump, just capitulated, well, Biden is my friend and I can't blah, blah, blah. And the left is falling apart. It's completely falling apart.
But
Yeah.
what's equally as interesting is that you get the sense that the left is still somewhat of a sleeping giant right now, and it just needs that shepherd to corral the sheep, so to speak. That's why so many people are cautiously optimistic about what Dr. Cornel West is capable of doing. I look at it as, no, please, go ahead.
We've had Cornel West on our show, and I like Cornel West. I appreciate what he's trying to do, but I don't necessarily know if Cornel West is going to be able to have the capacity and the finances to create a movement-based energy like Bernie Sanders. It's yet to be seen.
Sure.
But, not only that, Bernie Sanders had certain advantages. Bernie Sanders was a long-time senator, mayor, congressman. So he had a institutional understanding of how the system worked. Cornel West has no experience in electoral politics. So his credibility as a political force able to challenge internally how the system works is going to be somewhat questioned. So I'm not saying that we need Bernie to come back. I think Bernie Sanders has really done a few things that has soured the grapes of a lot of us in terms of, totally supporting Biden. The way he kind of turned his back on Cornel West was very distasteful in my opinion. But again, I kind of blame Bernie Sanders. Listen, this guy had 35% of the Democratic Party under his belt. He could have said, "Screw it, we're going to start our own party, and we're going to challenge the duopoly."
I think he could have run as an independent in 2016. I think that when they screwed him over in 2016, if he had walked,
I think 2016 running as a Democrat was a smart move. In 2020,
until they screwed him.
But in 2020, he could have run as an independent. Between 2016 and 2020, he should have mobilized the movement based on attacking Trump, mobilizing his troops effectively instead of coalescing with the Democrats. And then in 2020, he should have ran as an independent. I think he should have just taken over the Green Party, which already has an infrastructure, meshed all of his whole team into the Green Party, and literally challenged the duopoly. And I think they would have had to take him seriously, And even after he lost in 2020, even though he ran as a Democrat, he had the capacity to really create a movement. Even then, he could have created a third party or taken over the Green Party, channeled all his resources into some kind of movement, organizing people to really challenge the duopoly of the Democratic Party. But instead, he completely coalesced. And I understand where Sanders is coming from. Sanders is an old school socialist. He understands left history. He knows about how the old left. What's the old left? The old left is like the left of the 30s and 40s, where you had heavily involvement of the labor union. You had socialists, communists. He knows left history, and he knows the story of the United Front. He knows how, when the rise of the Nazis came in Germany, the Comintern, which was the Soviet Union's or the Communist Party International, the Communist International, basically told the communists and the socialists to coalesce with the Democrats to fight fascism. And some people will say that, that was a good idea. Well, the problem is the left got cannibalized after they engaged in that united front with the Democrats. Sanders is repeating the united front strategy by arguing, well, fascism is on the rise. The only choice for socialists and leftists is to coalesce with the Democrats because we have to fight fascism. That his psychology around why he's actually doing this. And many people on the left, particularly the more radical left, would argue the united front is the exact reason why the left is so weak in America.
Interesting.
I would agree with that. I think it also has to do with just this inherent fear of the establishment and the military-industrial complex and the hammer that they can bring down on people.
Speaking of which,
it's why they were so ready, willing, and able to basically say that you're a Russian asset for the past. It's like everyone has this short-term memory. It's like people don't understand this whole idea of, well, Trump is breaking all the norms and saying that his election was rigged. I'm like, what do you think the Democrats did for 4 years? They said that he was an illegitimate president. They tried to get the Electoral College voters to overturn the will of the election. They said that Putin actually had people flip votes in machines. Like, I have countless records on this stuff where they were saying that he's not a real president.
Right.
Do not take him seriously. And it wasn't just that they were against Trump. They were propping up the worst of the worst in society, whether it was James Comey, whether it was who's the former well, you had James Clapper, you had the worst of the worst on the conservative Bush right, you had you had
the neocons.
All of the neocons. I'm thinking of
I don't know.
Who am I thinking of, Pascal? I'm blanking on names right now.
Man. They had what's his name? Dick Cheney.
Jennifer Rubin. You had
Bolton. Bolton turned against Trump.
John Bolton, for God's sake.
Even though he was in Trump's administration, he turned against
John Brennan. Remember when John Brennan was interviewed by Bill Maher? All I'm thinking, John Brennan was one of the biggest spooks this country's ever seen.
I remember John Brennan.
So my attitude is, if you think that there's any justifiable explanation to the behavior of the Democratic establishment, believing that that was okay, and everything that Trump does is not okay,
right,
then the hypocrisy grows so large that in spite of all of our flaws, there's enough voters in this country who are going to give an FU to the establishment one more time and put Trump back in.
Well, one of the things I always say is we have to understand that the Democratic and Republican Party simply represent two different flanks of capital. The Republicans represent the right flank of capital. The Democrats represent the left flank of capital. They both represent different aspects and entities within the actual function of the power elite and capitalism in America. So the bottom line is that both of them are protecting capitalism, imperialism, and all of the other institutional mechanisms that are necessary to keep American empire functioning. The only difference between the two is that the Democratic Party is used to be the social engineer of what would normally be disgruntled minorities. What does that mean? The purpose of the Democratic Party is to maintain social control of gays, women, Latinos, blacks, and anyone else who would try to legitimately challenge the ruling class, because they understand that their positionality is somewhat different for historical purposes. They do that using various types of identity politics and a variety of other things. So what makes the Democrats more noxious to me, I've never been a member of the Democratic Party. I hate the Democratic Party. I don't trust Republicans, is that I understand that the Democratic Party is dangerous because it uses social control and fear to keep the disenfranchised in check. For example, the Democratic Party uses the institutional mechanisms in the Black community, historically Black colleges, fraternities, sororities, membership organizations,
churches,
churches. All of these institutional mechanisms
Yeah.
It uses patronage, what I pejoratively call fatback and biscuits, to keep them in line amongst the Democratic Party's loyal foot soldiers. And they do the same thing with unions. They do the same thing with the feminist organizations. They do the same thing with certain parts of other identity groups, you know? And what the thing that the Republicans don't have to worry about that because they don't care about those people anyway. The Republicans use fear of those peoples that the Democrats socially control to keep their largely white male middle, which is, by the way, that traditional group is expanding. The Republican Party is not just, white male anymore. They've been increasing in their popularity amongst white women. They're getting more Latino. Definitely, Florida is like the Latino. We know we have the Florida Gusano problem here, so that doesn't surprise us. A lot of places we have. I think Trump got like 33% of the Latino vote in 2020.
There's an increase of Black men that are switching over to the GOP. Like, it's been fairly noticeable.
Yes, there's an increase in Black men. What is becoming dangerous to the Democratic Party is that their traditional social control, their identitarian social control tactics aren't working anymore because certain elements of those identities have realized how betrayed they've been by the Democratic Party.
Yeah. And that's also why the statistics bear out from poll after poll over the last several months, and this is before campaign season really kicks into high gear, that Trump is beating Biden in almost every statistical measure, and it's only going to get worse the more his mental incapacities are exposed, the more that the policies that they've been lying about are exposed. And the fact of the matter is, Trump is one hell of a political actor. He really knows how to work the crowd. And Biden is not capable of doing that, and now more so than where he was just 3 years ago. And so now, while we're distracted, as a lot of these things tend to be, by these very, negligible differences between both sides, like you said, because they're basically two parties of capital, and one is just trying to outdo the other in terms of fear-mongering, because that's all they really have at this point. We're getting stuck in a real fascist situation, which has nothing to do with either major political party. It has to do with the powers that be in this country that want to take over every major city in some type of a police state capacity.
Yeah.
And so no greater example of that than what is going on right now.
This is freaking me out.
Atlanta.
This is something.
Yes, this is.
With cops too. This is a very serious problem.
And this is, and you know what? And this is, like, Pascal, you I'm sure you see this. This isn't even a conservative, or this is a capital problem. This is a money problem, because that is what is standing to benefit from this, is more than anything, is the military industrial complex. This is not partisan. This is not anything to do with, really electoral politics. This is
prosecutors in Georgia have filed racketeering charges against several dozen people, 61 to be exact, after a state investigation into ongoing local protests against a proposed police training facility that protesters have named Cop City, the Associated Press reports. A newly unsealed file dated August 29th of this year from the Fulton. So this is Fannie Willis's office that is doing this, indicting 61 people. The filing described these involved in opposing the training facility as anarchist and anti-police. The indictment accused those mentioned in the filing of arson, attacks on law enforcement officers, and destruction of government property. Again, they could just make up what's government property and what's not. The accusation comes under Georgia's racketeering law, which is also known as a RICO law. It is the very same law that was recently used to indict former President Donald Trump and several of his associates. Let me assure you of something before we continue. This is going to help Donald Trump in more ways than people can even begin to wrap their head around.
Everything they do is a gift for him.
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to correct something. I think this charge was brought by the Attorney General of the state, not Fannie Willis. But the larger point, though, is that Cop City, there's a lot to understand about Cop City, is that Cop City is obviously a consequence of the rise of the post-COVID police state, in that after the social damage that happened after COVID that caused all these urban crises, I think there's a bipartisan understanding post Black Lives Matter, post George Floyd,
That's what I think it is.
that we've
Yeah.
got to rehabilitate the police and supporting the police bipartisanly. And I think that they're actually trying to expand the cop city concept to Baltimore right now. I've been checking about that. So this thing is very important to the ruling class in a time where the fear of increasing economic precarity is on the horizon. It's the need to realize we got to find a way to house the surplus redundant labor we're going to have when this economy starts to crash. So we're going to need to shut these people up so we can build these kind of cop city metroplexes, if you will, to keep people on lock. So I definitely believe that the Democrats, who are drunk with the possibility that they can take Georgia, Atlanta, which is a city where all of their largely Democrat votes come from, is, and let's understand something. People talk about how Atlanta is, a kind of black upper middle class elite mecca. There is a massive class difference amongst black people in Atlanta, and it's one of the cities that's the best example of how the black political class, what Black Agenda Report calls the black misleadership class, uses the charade of black excellence to mask the actual way that they disregard the lives of poor and working class black people, which combines into the horrendous treatment that they get in the Fulton County Jail, which is another part of the story as well, where I was reading about how it is universally known that that jail is unlivable. They have cells with no toilets. It's literally crumbling. Since July, there have been 5 deaths, if not murders, in the Fulton County Jail. People can literally pick off the plaster in the jail, make weapons, and kill people. This happens in Fulton County Jail, okay? And they have had a serious rash of violence and death in these horrific conditions. And yet when recently interviewed, Fannie Willis says, I told people when I was running for office 15 years ago that we needed a new jail that would be humane. Like her response is that, well, I told people we needed a new jail 15 years ago, as if that solves the problem. So again, this is not only this is definitely a capitalist problem, but it's a class problem, and it's a class problem that exists within the black community that unfortunately likes to project this charade of the Black United Front. We all live this together against the white man, which has almost always been bullshit in this country and has been used as a mechanism to have black elites neutralize working class and poor black people and have their foot on their necks while they coalesce with the corporate Democrats into horrendous policy like this.
Yeah, this cop city is a really scary thing to me. I feel like this is something that we all need to take a stand on, because this is just the first of what they're going to start doing many. And I see it as a complete plan to clamp down on what they're anticipating is a lot of civil unrest. And I think it really is very like imperial forces to me, and very scary. Not to mention that in this particular case, we're not even talking about the environmental issue at stake, which is that is a preserved green area that serves a function for the people of Atlanta, but which is a whole other like racial environmental justice problem as well. But it is not by chance that the first one of these facilities is going into, I think it is the largest percent, like of a city of its size, the greatest percentage of black population for a city of its size. And so I don't think that that's a coincidence, that that's where that's going.
There's also the ramifications of poor electoral map strategizing on the Democratic Party's, part.
Absolutely.
I agree with you 100% that Georgia, for whatever reason, is going to be possibly even ground zero for the 2024 election. And that is a complete misfire, in my opinion, on the Democratic Party's part, because I think they're going to have a hard enough time maintaining the Rust Belt, which is ultimately where the election will probably be won and lost. And they can't afford to give up either Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. But one
Or
thing that
Arizona.
Or Arizona for that matter. But the one thing no one's talking about, not just a lot of people are going to talk about the fact that Virginia is most likely going to be in play next year. There's also the fact that Florida is basically a solid red state now at the statewide election level. So what that allows the GOP to do is not have to put tens of millions of dollars into a race to protect Rick Scott, or whoever's going to be the GOP candidate is going to easily win the 30 electoral votes in the state of Florida. That allows them to now siphon that money into other states like Georgia, like a state where now what you're doing as a result of Cop City, we all know what Governor Kemp is going to do, but Senators Ossoff and Warnock are basically doing the same thing. There is no difference. So you're not presenting an electoral argument for, well, if we just work our butts off again to make sure that this state stays blue, everything's going to be fine. That argument is going out the door now as a result of what they're doing here. And that's why, in the case of what's happening as we continue, the Stop Cop City protests have gone on for years. The controversial city is a proposed police and firefighting training facility being built on a section of city-owned land called the Wilani Forest. The project is estimated to cost about $90 million, of which the residents are paying. The residents in the surrounding area are predominantly Black, what a surprise, and many are lower income. Opponents worry about losing green space and about the millions of dollars dedicated to bolstering bloated, militarized police force. And there is the key word, militarized police force, which has been happening since the worst president of our most likely lifetime, George W. Bush, where a lot of this really kicked into high gear. The project was first approved by the Atlanta City Council in 2021, and despite heavy opposition, the council approved funding for the center's construction this June.
Yeah.
Now, what, of course,
screw what the people want.
And of course,
screw the people.
What is the unifying theme here with the City Council of Atlanta? It is predominantly Democrat.
Yes, that's a good point.
So for anyone who's thinking that this is a red versus blue issue, no, this is a capital versus working class issue, and capital is winning and continues to win.
I feel like we can't let this happen. Apparently, there's some sort of action being planned in November. Something is going down in November as far as this being on their ballot or them being able to have like an initiative on this or something like that. But there's some sort of big action happening there in November. And if I'm anywhere here, if I'm here, I'm going to go, because I feel like we can't let them get Cop City through, because then there's just going to start being everywhere.
Pascal, Ben Franklin once said that those who are willing to give up liberty for security are entitled to neither. Why are we living in a time today where people are so ready, willing, and able to give up their liberty for security?
I think that the real answer to that question is because America has lost its knowledge of its radical history. And I'm not just talking about Black radical history. I'm talking about white working class radical history, American radical history, the radical movement politics that got us the New Deal, the radical politics that got us, Medicaid, Medicare, the Great Society, and all that stuff, the radical politics that ended Jim Crow, the coalitional politics between Black and white folk that help always make things better for Americans overall. Those ideas are lost because the media, the schools, no one teaches that stuff. You're not going to learn that in college. You're not going to learn that anywhere unless you take like maybe some radical left, like labor courses. But you've got to get that political education on your own to understand, that there have been legions of people over American history that try to challenge this stuff. And unfortunately, the thing that fears the ruling class the most is us returning to those memories and tactics. one of the things that's most obvious to me about demonstrating that is how every time you listen to the right wingers and even some Democrats, hello, Eric Adams, they always talk about the fear of socialism, the fear of Marxism, the fear of communism. I saw, what's the name of the wacko woman? Margaret Taylor Greene. She was talking about how the arrest of Enrique, what's the name of the guy who's Proud Boys guy, the Spanish guy who was the head of the got sentenced to 22 years. He's from Florida.
Barrios, Juan Barrios.
She was saying how this is a legal witch hunt by the communist judiciary to punish its opponents. We will not take this. You know, do you even know what communism is? I mean,
well, that's what I want to ask her. I actually would like to ask her, not just her, but a lot of people like that throw around words like communism, Marxism, socialism, fascism, and they have not the slightest idea as to what those are. Like that, she couldn't define communism for you. There's no way.
One time when I was driving back to New Jersey, and this was a few years ago, I decided to do an alternate route because I always go I-95. This time I wanted to see another part of America. I drove I-75. And when you drive I-75, you drive directly through Northwest Georgia, which is what the area of the country that she represents. And you realize that there is a reflection in so many ways. Because one thing I could say about Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's not dumb. She plays dumb very effectively.
I don't know.
And says these asinine, off-the-wall type things because in a lot of ways it appeals to the not so bright, lower educated individuals who live in rural America who are God-fearing and are very quick to misunderstand what's really going on around them. It's not that they're not aware that something's wrong. It's that they don't know exactly what's wrong and where to point that anger or that fear. And in her case, she's a total political opportunist who is doing everything in her capacity to make sure that she builds enough political capital so that when she feels comfortable enough, she's going to run for the U.S. Senate. Because this is what these people do. There are seldom few people who are in positions of power who don't know the score and just want to play dumb for the cameras because they know what works.
I think that two things can be true. I think that she's a political opportunist, and I think she's not that bright. And I still don't think that she could tell you what any of those things are that are coming out of her mouth. She's just reiterating talking points.
One thing I do want to bring up, Pascal, that you did mention that I think is very important here. You know, we're very friendly with Andrew Yang. And when he ran for mayor of New York, there was this unconscionable movement from people on what you would call more of the far left that felt it was necessary to make it their mission to say, don't even rank Andrew Yang, rank Eric Adams instead.
That's insane.
And now you have this man as your mayor. And
there was a study that was done about Eric Adams and his re-imposition of stop and frisk, and that the disparities in terms of the stop and frisk are so great they're almost as racially as bad as when Bloomberg was mayor. So he is literally implemented a legal system that is persecuting black voters, black citizens worse than prior mayors.
Yeah, see, Andrew Yang wouldn't be doing that.
No.
Yeah. That's the thing, like, you know what, but yet the leftists, it's like he wasn't pure enough to even rank him second.
No, there's no question that if Andrew was mayor, he probably would have done very similar tactics to Bloomberg. I don't doubt that for a second. But do I think he would be going after people and basically being a king among men the way that Eric Adams is?
Oh, no.
Eric Adams thinks he's running for president in 2028.
Yeah. Listen, guys, I'm having some technical difficulties because my battery is running low. I think my plug
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much for coming
Perfect
on.
timing, too. Pascal, please, how can people find you? This conversation is always enlightening.
This is Revolution Podcast on YouTube, on all your relevant podcast apps. Check out our Patreon. Just go to our YouTube page. This is Revolution Podcast. And just check out our recent episodes. We have all of our YouTubes. And go to any podcast app, Apple Podcasts, podcaster, Spotify, and you can find all of our past episodes.
Yeah, and between you and like the left reckoning guys, I feel like for people who want to understand like things like Marxism and communism, those are the shows to watch. That's how I kind of think about it.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
Thanks,
Same
Pascal.
to you, Pascal.
Bye.
Take care, buddy. Always a great conversation, and of course, yeah, I like when we're tight with our time, and that we're effective with our time.
Well, and you know what? It's just nice to talk to smart people.
Yes, and as I was saying, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is dumb in certain ways, but I think she's very savvy in other ways.
Well, that's okay. So we could say that about Trump.
Sure.
Right. And so there's certain things where people open their mouths and you can tell that really inside there's this vapid sort of empty moronic inside. And yes, somehow on the surface, their characters developed enough coping and functional mechanisms to sort of relate in the real world to function in a career zone. That doesn't mean that there's any real intelligence or like an emotional quotient or any sort of anything there that's worth anything. Are we going to really talk about her?
No.
Oh, okay, please don't make me talk about her.
I don't know why you thought I was.
I don't know, because we were just talking about her and then you were pulling something up and I just didn't want to.
No,
I am she's terrible.
And yes, she is. She's terrible. She's just a joke. And that's really the problem.
Ooh, American oligarchy.
So we do have one story that we want to cover. And by the way, guys, if you haven't smashed the like button, subscribe to all those wonderful things. Tomorrow, most likely at 5 p.m., we are going to be co-hosting Status Quo News for our good friend Jordan Chariton. So make sure that you tune in. We'll have lots of wonderful things to talk about at that time. So we hope that you will join us. But we do want to talk about this very important story, which again relates to the very broken system that we're living in today. And that, of course, is, again, friend of the show, David Sirota over at The Lever, was kind enough to put out this story about Warren Buffett's son.
And we're not talking about, and I had to clarify, it's different from Jimmy Buffett's son, because we were just talking because Jimmy Buffett just died, and so that's what I was thinking of.
Well, he made a comment relating to that fact that he, my honorary cousin, as he would call him.
Yeah, but there's no relation.
So Warren Buffett's cousin. So Warren Buffett's son has basically bought himself a city in America, Decatur, Illinois.
I didn't know it was for sale.
Now, apparently, with all that money, there's a lot of things that you can do.
I know everything's for sale, right?
One Decatur, Illinois resident says Howard Buffett has spent his money in the city on monuments to himself and to his family and his friends.
It's like Lord Farquaad. Oh, these are such small people.
It's a sizzling July afternoon in Decatur, an endearing plain city surrounded by endless rows of neat crops in the heart of Illinois farm country. And I am, as instructed, waiting at the public library. In one exact appointed time, Mark Girdler stomps in wearing black New World Order shirt, tinted 70s sunglasses, and a baseball cap dotted with pineapples on top of a bounty flowing red hair. Girdler is a Decatur activist who heads a self-described mutual aid group / cult called Carnalia. And he's going to tell me how he got in a scrap with a local billionaire. First, without any greeting, he asks a conspiratorial question. Can we take a ride?
I think, but you don't need to read this. This is like a first-person thing that you're reading for David Sirota. Why? What's the story?
The story here is that Buffett, 68, is the second child of Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world. Raised in Omaha, the young Buffett came to Decatur in the early 90s to work as an executive for Arch Daniels Midland, the agricultural products giant. Shocking. Since then, he's used his father's money. Buffett has pushed Decatur toward his preferred version of reality. According to the local media reporting over the last few decades, Howard G. Buffett Foundation has spent over $200 million in a shrinking city of 70,000 people. It's a lot of money. To one degree or another, we live under all constraints created by the whims and desires of billionaires. For the most part, the billionaire decision-making process is kept self-servingly and purposely opaque. But in Decatur, the process is crystal clear. Everyone here knows what Howard Buffett does. I wanted to know what it's like living under long exposure to extreme wealth.
You're not going to read this whole first-person account, are you?
Well,
guys, read this article in The Lever because it does look like it's really good, but it's weird for me for you to be like narrating. Like,
From 2017 to 2018, Buffett served as a local top cop, Macon County Sheriff.
Macon.
Well, Macon.
It's Macon.
Yes, ma'am. He didn't have to win an election to do so, but rather walked into the role when the acting sheriff, Tom Schneider, retired and named Buffett as his successor. Ain't that sweet?
I just feel like there's lots of towns and cities like this, though, to some extent.
Schneider went on to work at Buffett's Macon County Law Enforcement Training Center, a hub of policing facilities in Decatur that include a building named after Schneider himself.
That sounds like a cop city.
Buffett's foundation donated $15 million to build this training facility.
It's a cop city.
Earlier this year, the connection between Buffett and the board became particularly noteworthy. In February, the former exec of the Standards Board, Brent Fisher, was charged with multiple felonies. A government watchdog discovered that Fisher faked the board chairman's signature in the course of fabricating a certification allowing Buffett to serve as a sworn officer despite not having the requisite training hours. The state watchdog also found that Fisher agreed to provide the certificate hours after receiving a $10,000 check. Boy, it's pretty easy to buy off these local officials, isn't it? From the Buffett Foundation to buy equipment for police dogs. Well, we love dogs, but not in this capacity. A judge later dropped the charges on the grounds that they were filed in the wrong jurisdiction. Fisher has long since lost his job.
This is Decatur, Illinois, yes?
Yes.
So basically, he bought himself a city.
Yes.
Well, people do that.
Isn't that a great thing?
No, it's disgusting, but
Well,
I
it's
don't
not
think
cool.
that it's unusual. I think that, look, we saw that down in what happened with the election in Surfside. Developer basically came in and bought himself a seat on the city commission, got rid of who he didn't like, and now he's building all these new developments in the town where the building collapsed and they're not even doing an investigation. So, yeah, people buy towns and then just run them how they want to. That's what happens.
And this is also what happens when the local residents, if you think voting is bad at the federal level for big elections, why don't you take a look at how bad voter turnout is for local elections? They're the lowest number of them all. There is nothing worse. And so that in lies the real problem here. We don't really have a system that makes sense anymore. And why would it?
Everything's for sale.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole point. Everything's for sale.
In the mid-90s, the Department of Justice found that Archer Daniels Midland had conspired to fix the price of lysine, a growth-spurring feed additive for pigs and chickens. The story eventually became The Informant, an 2009 Steven Soderbergh film full of many zany corporate malfeasance. Don't look for Buffett on screen, though. While he was a high-ranking executive at the company during the price fixing, he wasn't directly implicated. After the scandal broke, Buffett left. Is there any surprise here?
No, but what's the end result? What's the moral of
Decatur is one of the fastest shrinking cities in the country, but doesn't fit the traditional profile of decimated Rust Belt America. Its fields of loam are still historically rich, and they are still full of corn and soybeans. Archer Daniels Midland's factories are still here, turning that raw material into thousands of industrial products like xanthan gum and sorbitol, and then into money. So it's kind of like a mixed bag of sorts in terms of what was accomplished here. On the one hand, he brings money into the town, but then on the other hand, this is a very long read.
Yeah.
So driving through Decatur, a stasis is apparent. Some of it manifests in endearing ways, like the continued survival of a place called La Gondola Spaghetti House, where you can get the titular item by the half gallon. Most of it feels quietly depressing, like the grass growing unattended through parking lot pavement cracks. In a diner downtown, I overhear a group of white-haired men fretting about the decline of the American empire. What have we lost now? 3 wars in a row? Well,
this is what I'm saying. This is something that you guys should go read. That's it sounds like almost like a journal entry by David Sirota. And I think that there's probably a way for us to sort of summarize the point of the story. And maybe you guys should go to the Lever and read it.
Outside, it gets more dramatic. Next to a big red fire truck made possible by the Howard G. Buffett slick black helicopter that kids can clamber,
Clamor. Clamor.
all over. In chunky orange wording on its front fuselage, it reads, Howard G. Buffett, Macon County Sheriff. So the guy bought himself a sheriff's seat.
Yes, he bought himself a town.
And this is probably something that will become more and more common as the wealth gap grows more and more.
Wait, go back down for a second. I want to see something. What did that say? Go back down. There, right there.
Here?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
In late 2019, after Illinois passed the cannabis legalization bill, the Buffett Foundation funded and forced through the creation of a Decatur Police Department position for an officer solely tasked with drug and alcohol driving offenses. At this point, Buffett had left the Macon County Sheriff's Office and was once again a private citizen.
Oh, okay. Okay, so very interesting. That's so nice of him to be really on top of that. Thank you for policing us.
And that in itself really goes to show you the hooks that big pharma and big alcohol have in society. Because if you're going to go after people who smoke cannabis, who are the least dangerous, people that are on opioids or alcohol are infinitely more dangerous.
Well, it's just a money thing at this point for them. Militarization of money, but it's extremely authoritarian. This whole thing is very authoritarian.
In physical form, Buffett's law enforcement passions are embodied in the Macon County Law Enforcement Training Center. Minutes from downtown Decatur, it's a cordoned off cluster of shiny, boxy training facilities. The grass looks freshly cut. The cement feels freshly poured. On one corner stands a statue of Bass Reeves, a man in a cowboy hat and a droopy mustache who was, according to the plaque, a legendary Old West lawman / prolific murderer in the course of duty. Old Bassy shot and killed 14 outlaws to defend his life.
All right, yeah. I think that basically, so he came into this town, became the sheriff, and built a cop city for himself.
Pretty much.
That's what it sounds like to me. So that's not good. Which just goes towards what I'm saying is that this whole concept of over policing is just starting.
And it really just comes down to, what they're going to ultimately end up doing all over the country.
Yeah.
In so many ways. And as we've been talking about tonight, the issue of creating these cop cities, where basically you don't have anything to say. You do not have a say anymore. And maybe in some cases you do have a sheriff who maybe has some sensibilities, but this is no different than when I can still remember, who was the guy that was the head of the Democratic Party in the state who was very rich? This was like 2 spots ago. Getting the jet, Steve.
I don't know.
Anyway, my point is that this was a rich guy, and there's a serious class problem in this country. And so the attitude of fellow, we'll just say activists were, yeah, but he's our billionaire. If you're a billionaire, you're a billionaire.
As long as he's blue.
Yeah, as long as he's blue. Now, I hope there's enough people who are waking up to the reality that that doesn't mean anything.
No. They're all funding this cop city thing.
You're ultimately going to get to the same destination only if one takes a little bit longer than another. That's all you need to know.
We're going to be talking more about this, speaking of cop city, right?
We will.
Because, and the one thing is that I know they're looking for help in representing the 61 or 62 people that have been charged under the State RICO Act, which is just off the wall. And by the way, when you're seeing things listed like money laundering, they're being charged with money laundering. And what that's based on, okay, is a bail fund that was set up for the forest protectors and people that contributed to the bail fund for forest protectors. And we're talking people who maybe donated $25 or $100, whatever it is, are part of that group in that RICO complaint. So people that donated money. It isn't all people that were doing anything, even though the people that are technically doing things were really not doing anything. But I'm just saying, the only people showing violence was the law enforcement that were shooting at unarmed forest defenders. They were shooting at hippies.
So, a friend of the show, Hannah Riley, who is basically covering this. So, absolutely desperate, a $40 transfer of money to buy walkie-talkies and gas between two bail fund organizers is criminal conspiracy.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about with this. They're really grasping.
$27 transfer for forest tools, also furtherance of conspiracy for the state of Georgia. A $50 reimbursement for communal meals in the forest, criminal conspiracy.
Yeah.
An $11 reimbursement for glue, criminal conspiracy.
Yeah. See, this is not ultimately going to end up in, like, this is just for them to be trying to derail the protest and trying to keep knocking it down. That's all it is. It's not like these people are not.
The mask is off now.
Yeah.
It's completely off now. And this is also why Trump is getting stronger by the day, because they're looking at him basically as a political prisoner. And in a lot of ways, he is, because he's the only one that anybody is really going after. There are tons of other high-ranking officials in our government, in our unelected official class, that are just as guilty.
You mean I just finished a book called American Exception, and he refers to it as the tripartite state.
The tripartite state.
The tripartite state.
I could call it that too. But these people are not, again, if this was a case where they were really going after everybody, I would say, have at it. Take them down. But that's not what's happening. And we know that that's not what's happening.
I wish they would, though, go after everybody. Like, had Obama done his job and gone after the war criminals in W's administration, that would have been the time to set this precedent. Like, there were numerous crimes that could have been addressed and were overlooked, because at the end of the day, they don't want to go after him because they are the same. They're in the same class. They're not going to go after their own, because then they will go after them. And that's why they don't do that. And so this is going to I hope this, you know what? Let this open the door. Let Trump win. Let him prosecute the hell out of this administration. I'm sure there's tons of stuff in there.
That's also why it's going to be very interesting to see how this ultimately unfolds, because he really is coming in like the Pied Piper this time. Like, he's got I don't think he has any reservations at all.
No.
And I think there's a lot of people in this country. This is why he's gaining a lot of momentum with black men in this country, because they really believe that if he goes in there this time, it's really going to be as he suggested it would be. When he came in the first time, he was very much, not sure what to do. He didn't know who to trust. He put his faith in certain people. And as a result of that, you're now faced with a very unique circumstance of what's going to ultimately end up happening as a result of that. Now, there is no surprises. The only real surprise is how far is he going to take it? And there's a lot of people who are going to back him on this. And why? Because of this shit. Because of the fact that the system, the empire, it's all breaking down. And and the people who have the power to change it are doing nothing. They're doing less than nothing. They're giving you crumbs and telling you to eat it like it's a full pie.
Right. What is that we're supposed to be happy about? Eight drilling permits. We're going to have to look up what that percentage is of drilling permits. If it's anywhere near like the percentage of student loans that he forgave in proportionate to the amount of student loans that exist, it's that don't impress me much.
The problem,
Joe.
of course, is that Trump is making speeches in New Hampshire talking about, we totally are going to drill, baby, drill. That's what we're going to do. And that's the downside, is that you're going to get a guy who is basically just saying what Joe is not going to say publicly, which is drill, baby, drill, because that's what we're doing. Trump is just going to try to take credit for everything. He even said, the economy's rebounded because of everything that we did. It's all on me. Again, and the sad truth is that his showmanship's going to work even better this time around. When everyone's like, there's no way he could possibly win. Oh, really?
Oh, he's going to win.
Really? They really want to chance this again. They really do. They want to take a chance again that this is going to happen.
I don't think that they want to take a chance. It's they have nothing else. They can't win. You make it sound like because of what they're doing, they're done. Like, they can't win. He's going to win. It's his to lose.
Why do you
his
think they're why do you-
percentage is not going to go down no matter what they do.
Why do you think they're having a cow about RFK or even Marianne, but especially about Dr. West? They're doing this right now.
That's how scared they are.
Right now, they haven't even started the primary season, and
they've already had to change the whole primary schedule because they're scared. So I mean, they've already started.
And if I'm Donald Trump, not giving them campaign advice, but if I'm Donald Trump, can you believe what they're doing here in New Hampshire? It's really terrible. They totally changed the schedule. They so don't respect your vote. They're really inconsiderate.
They're making a lot of what we call.
You're making it so easy for him to just stand up there and say, if you vote for me, I totally respect you.
Which proves actually what I have been saying for all along when it comes to people that are in the top of the party. They prefer to have a Republican in there. They don't care who it is as long as it's somebody that's good for capital.
Well,
they don't care who it is. And if it's somebody that's not a Democrat, then it is so much easier, one, for them to explain away why they don't do anything, blame somebody else, and two, fundraise. And they love to fundraise.
But I don't know how effective fundraising is going to be going forward for them. I mean, obviously they could tap into as many billionaires as they need to, but in terms of being able to get small dollar donations from people that are really the voters that can make the impact at the local level, I don't know. I just think there's a real disillusionment, especially with the Democratic Party at this point, because people are desperate and they're trying to find a path somewhere. And it's not that they're rushing to the Republican Party for that solution. It's that they're looking for anything that is outside of the two parties in order to do it.
And the truth is the Democrats are so frigging sanctimonious and elitist.
Yeah.
And it's really turn offish. And in some cases, they're just so over identity politic. And that also is a huge turnoff to a lot of people. And so you see more and more people that are just going away from them because it's just such a turnoff. They're not necessarily registering as Republican. Most people actually register as no party affiliation.
Oh, yeah. And that's proof positive here in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Because especially even with youth, the number one party affiliation is independent. No party affiliation.
Which I would argue in Florida is just not a great plan.
Not a good plan.
There's no reason.
But number two is Republican. And way down at the bottom is Democrat. So that should tell you all you need to know.
Yeah.
That's
young people are not registering as Democrats.
Hey, listen, when the leader of your party is DWS, why would you want to be a part of the party? What good is that going to do for you? You're not actually going to make the impact that is necessary in order to change things the way that they need to be changed. It's just reflective in the way at some point you can have all of the rallies that you want to have to register voters that you think are going to come out for you. But when the party is so rotten from the top down, eventually people are going to look elsewhere. If this was a normal circumstance, somebody like Donald Trump would never be able to attain the power that he obtained in the first place, much less be in a position to get it back. And that's where we are.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, my friend,
that's what they do.
I just don't think people are. I just don't think people care. This is not like times have changed, and especially because Biden is fading with his mental capacities.
I have a demand list, and if Biden were to satisfy, a handful of things on my demand list between now and me going into a voting booth,
we agree.
Well, that's my point. That's why I'm registered as a Democrat here. It's the only way, because otherwise we can't participate in the primaries.
Yes.
So
you should always participate, even if you don't like the party itself.
And so you have to go. You have to do it to participate. I wish that were not the case. I'd rather that not be the case. I'd rather not have to be affiliated. But we don't have. That's what we have here is closed primary. I support open primaries. I support ranked choice voting.
Same.
So, if it were up to, and then the truth is, if you had open primaries and ranked choice voting, that would be the end of the complete grip of the duopoly, because then everybody could just be no party and more people would be no party. The only reason people affiliate with parties for the most part is to participate in closed primaries.
Last thing I will mention, we will talk about this. Remember, tomorrow, most likely 5 p.m., we're going to be going live on Status Quo News. Jen and I are going to be co-hosting for Jordan tomorrow. So hopefully you'll tune in. One of the things that we're going to talk about, and one of the reasons that I do think that Trump right now is tracking to win again, apparently the state of Colorado is trying to throw Trump off the ballot. That is not going to help you. That is only going to backfire. Even if Trump has to run for president from a prison cell, he can still do it. You know who ran from prison once and did pretty well, all things considered? Eugene Debs. That's right, the socialist candidate in the 1924 election. Or was it 1920? I think it was 1920. Point being is that he won over 1 million votes running from prison. I wonder if Donald Trump will be allowed to tweet from prison if he actually gets convicted. Just a thought.
I don't think we call it tweeting anymore.
He'll be Xing?
Is he Xing?
Is he Xing from
Xing
prison?
is what we used to say about people doing ecstasy, which is MDMA, which now I think they call something else. But in any event, that's what Xing was. When we were Xing in college, it was taking ecstasy. So if you want to say Xing, which also the whole concept of X as a logo, how pretentious. However, I would like to address that I am pleased, and I really would like to see that this lawsuit goes through, that Elon Musk is suing the Anti-Defamation League.
Oh, the fact that he's going after, was it Rosenblatt?
Oh,
yeah.
Greenblatt?
Greenblatt.
Rosenblatt?
Don't look at me. I'm not trying
Oh,
to.
God.
come
He's
off
just,
as
he's so disgusting. I can't remember.
he's
I
disgusting.
loathe
Yeah.
the Anti-Defamation League. Loathe them. So the fact that, and here's the thing, I also do not like Elon Musk, but I don't dislike Elon Musk to the extent that I dislike the Anti-Defamation League. So everything is,
Jonathan Greenblatt.
Greenblatt.
Yes. We can talk about that tomorrow. We'll talk about.
I love that he's going after that. Well, somebody else is going after them too.
Colin, we'll do. Already giving you information for tomorrow. Let's definitely do a clip for tomorrow on Status Coup of Jonathan Greenblatt and his greatest hits. Because you want to talk about a person who really represents. If you want to know what the face of AIPAC really looks like, this is the guy.
But this could potentially be the end of them. Because what Elon Musk is claiming, and by the way, he actually apparently has like receipts to show this, like in terms of the numbers and the paperwork to back it up. But he says if he did a conservative estimate and said that they were responsible for 10% of his loss, when in fact he feels like it's closer to 50 or whatever, but even if he did a conservative estimate, that's like $4 billion.
Oh, he'll put them out of business.
They'll be done.
They'll be done.
And that I actually like. So in this case, I would be rooting for Elon Musk.
Well, I would be rooting for him too, because the ADL, as is with AIPAC, this is where anti-Semitism fire comes from.
Yeah.
This is where it comes
We're
from.
so sick of you claiming everything is anti-Semitic.
Mm-hmm. And that's why working class, we know that it runs through all classes, but the biggest reason why working class people have anti-Semitic views is because of people like Jonathan Greenblatt. They represent the worst of the worst when it comes to Jewish culture.
Don't let the worst of us represent us.
That's a great line.
I think it's like, truthfully, like people, if you do not have like familiarity with Jewish people, you've not been amongst tribesmen, do not let the worst of us represent us. You know what I'm saying? It's unfortunate that tends to like be the case, but that guy is a complete piece of garbage.
So look for that tomorrow when we go live. Most likely at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Smash that like button, subscribe, share, do all those wonderful things that we ask of each and every one of you. If we don't see you on Status Coup tomorrow, we'll see you Monday.